Before Paris was a city of lights, before it was a symbol, before it was even a name, it was a stretch of river, a cluster of islands, and a gamble against the unknown. Long before monuments rose and revolutions shook the world, human beings stood on the banks of the Seine and chose to stay. That decision, quiet, unrecorded, and irreversible, set in motion one of the longest, bloodiest, most brilliant urban stories ever told. The shock of Paris's history begins not with kings or cathedrals, but with survival. Around the 3rd century BCE, a Celtic tribe known as the Parisii settled along the Seine, building wooden structures on the river's islands, trading by water, and defending themselves from floods and rivals alike. Their settlement was modest, but its location was everything. The Seine was a lifeline, a corridor for commerce, ideas, and eventually armies. When Roman legions arrived in the 1st century BCE, they did not find an empty land. They found a people already rooted, already thriving, already unwilling to vanish. The Romans conquered the region and transformed it. Lutetia, as they called it, was rebuilt in stone. Roads were paved, baths steamed with Roman luxury. An amphitheater echoed with cheers and violence. Yet even as Roman order imposed itself, Paris never fully surrendered its identity. It became a frontier city of empire, both Roman and not, disciplined yet restless. When the Western Roman Empire began to collapse under pressure from invasions and internal decay, Lutetia did not fall in a single dramatic moment. It withered slowly, stripped of its grandeur, retreating inward for protection. Then came a new shock. In the late 5th century, a Frankish king named Clovis chose Paris as his capital. This decision altered the city's destiny forever. Clovis's conversion to Christianity tied Paris to the emerging power of the church, embedding it into a new moral and political order. The city was no longer merely a regional hub, it was becoming a center of power, faith, and continuity in a fractured world. But power brings conflict, and Paris's rise was marked by suffering. Through the early Middle Ages, the city endured Viking raids that tore through the Seine like lightning. Longships appeared without warning, fires consumed neighborhoods, churches were looted. The population fled or hid behind crude defenses. Paris survived not because it was invincible, but because it adapted. Walls were strengthened, bridges were fortified. The city learned that survival meant vigilance. As centuries passed, Paris transformed again. Under the Capetian kings, beginning in the late 10th century, it became the heart of a centralized French monarchy. Kings ruled not from distant fortresses, but from within the city itself. With royal power came expansion. Stone bridges replaced wooden crossings. Markets grew dense and loud. Scholars gathered. And from this intellectual ferment emerged the University of Paris, one of the most influential centers of learning in medieval Europe. Theology, philosophy, law, ideas that would shape Western civilization, were debated in cramped halls and smoky rooms. Yet this growth came at a cost. Paris was filthy, overcrowded, and dangerous. Disease spread easily. Fire was a constant threat. The gap between rich and poor widened dramatically. The city was alive, but it was also cruel. When famine struck, it struck hard. When plague arrived in the 14th century, it was devastating. The Black Death ripped through Paris, killing tens of thousands, emptying streets, collapsing families, and leaving behind fear so deep it reshaped religious belief and social order. Anger simmered beneath the surface. Taxation increased to fund endless wars, particularly the long and brutal conflict with England, later known as the 100 Years' War. Paris became a city under strain, occupied, contested, divided. At times it fell under English control, at others it was torn apart by internal factions. Parisians rioted against elites, murdered officials, and rose in violent revolt. The city was no longer just a prize, it was a battleground of ideas, loyalties, and rage. As the medieval world gave way to the early modern era, Paris entered a new phase of contradiction. It was becoming Europe's largest city, a magnet for artists, writers, and thinkers. Renaissance ideals flowed in from Italy. Architecture grew more refined. Art flourished. And yet religious conflict poisoned daily life. Catholics and Protestants coexisted uneasily until coexistence shattered altogether. The massacre of St. Bartholomew's Day in 1572 stained its streets with blood, as thousands of Protestants were murdered by their neighbors in an explosion of sanctioned violence. Paris had become a place where belief could justify slaughter. The 17th century brought order, but at a price. Under absolute monarchs like Louis XIII and Louis XIV, Paris was reshaped by centralized power. While the Sun King eventually moved the royal court to Versailles, Paris remained the beating heart of administration, culture, and population. Grand avenues and monumental buildings emerged, symbols of control as much as beauty. The city was disciplined, watched, regulated. Dissent was punished. Hunger remained common. The poor lived packed into unhealthy quarters, while elites enjoyed salons and spectacle. By the late 18th century, the tension was unbearable. Bread shortages, inequality, and political paralysis pushed Paris to the edge. Then came the moment that changed not only the city, but the world. In 1789, Parisians stormed the Bastille. The prison itself mattered less than what it represented: arbitrary power, royal injustice, and centuries of silence. The French Revolution exploded outward from Paris in waves of hope and horror. Crowds filled the streets, monarchs fell, heads rolled beneath the blade of the guillotine. Liberty was proclaimed, then betrayed, then defended again through terror. Paris during the Revolution was electrifying and terrifying. It was a city where ideals were shouted and lives were ended in the same breath. The monarchy collapsed, the republic rose, then violence consumed its own architects. Fear ruled. Yet from this chaos emerged enduring principles: citizenship, rights, secular governance that would echo far beyond France. In the 19th century, Paris struggled to stabilize itself. Empires rose and fell. Napoleon Bonaparte transformed the city into an imperial capital, crowning himself emperor and exporting Parisian influence across Europe through conquest. After his defeat, revolutions returned again and again, each time erupting from the streets of Paris. In 1830, in 1848, in 1871, when the Paris Commune briefly seized control, attempting radical social transformation before being crushed in one of the bloodiest episodes in the city's history. Thousands were executed, entire neighborhoods burned. The anger of Paris was met with overwhelming force. Yet from this suffering emerged renewal. Under the direction of Baron Haussmann, Paris was torn apart and rebuilt. Medieval alleyways were demolished, wide boulevards cut through old quarters. Sewers, parks, and uniform facades reshaped daily life. The modern city was born, beautiful and controlled, designed to inspire awe and suppress revolt simultaneously. Paris became a symbol of modernity, elegance, and power. The 20th century tested that image brutally. World War I drained the city of youth and optimism. World War II brought occupation. Nazi forces marched down Parisian streets. The city endured humiliation, censorship, and fear. Resistance operated in shadows. When liberation finally came in 1944, it was emotional, imperfect, and hard-won. Paris survived again, not untouched, but unbroken. In the decades that followed, Paris reinvented itself once more. Colonial empires collapsed. Immigration reshaped neighborhoods. Protests erupted in 1968, challenging authority and tradition. The city became a stage for global culture, fashion, cinema, and political debate. Its past weighed heavily, but it also inspired. And here, finally, the long arc bends towards something like resolution. Paris is not a city without scars. Its history is written in blood, fire, and stone. But it is also written in resilience. Across 2 millennia, it has endured conquest, collapse, plague, revolution, and war. It has absorbed defeat and transformed it into identity. Paris survives not because it avoided history, but because it endured all of it. A city born from a river settlement, forged in empire, baptized in revolution, and still standing, layered, defiant, alive. The story of Paris is not the story of perfection. It is the story of survival.